welcome everyone once again to our third webinar in our fourth. Sorry, huge. I was counting them in my mind because Patrick was the grand opener. We were grand openers for each other, I think, in a lot of ways, starting the webinars. And then we had Karina and Silko and Violeta Bulc, and today with us, we have again something very interesting. I'm very curious around this conversation happening today because we have a couple, Nilima and Vijay, coming from another part of the world, which always invites perspectives and thinking we kind of take for granted or we don't think about at all. And it's an honor, and thank you for coming today and joining this sometime together. We'll have asking questions, conversations. Of course, you will all also talk to each other as always, what we try to do. But a couple that you know lived their life for a long time together, survived a lot, learned a lot, explored a lot together. You both have experiences in corporate environment, in your own personal practices, spiritual practices, and different kind of explorations and sciences, wisdoms that you explored through life. There's yoga or Shakti, and you both have books, which is always amazing because for me, it's always, I want to write a book once because it feels then you kind of, you know, have something to say. And Vijay wrote a book, My Cancer is Me, The Journey from Illness to Wholeness, and Nilima on Shakti leadership. And we will touch upon, you know, not just your books, beyond that, through this conversation today. As we envisioned it, we said it's going to be kind of a dance between all four of us, because although I'm talking all the time right now, Matej is my co-host today, but I feel we are all co-hosts with Nilima and Vijay today for this session. And we'll be exploring and opening up. Let's see what happens. Just a note, a very technical one. We are recording this session today. I hope you're all okay with that. We're not going to share it publicly, but it's very special because Nilima and Vijay are actually for the first time speaking together on the topic of conscious living and conscious leadership as being kind of intertwined with each other. So as we are also excited to see what comes out from this kind of conversation. So we said we're gonna record. And what else of technical? I want to say a thank you to all the sponsors for our World of Synergy conference that are still with us within this exploration of different forms. We are changing again, as I'm sure you are, within the times we're living in, and we're preparing something different for October. It will be something, but we don't have a final version yet, so don't worry. So that's it. I think I talked enough, right, Matej? Before we connect in with a word, I want to give the word to Matej. You're on this side here, that's why I'm showing this. So,
Thank you, Ina. Welcome all. Just one feeling to share. While we were preparing the session with Vijay and Nilima, it was so special for me because I could feel during the preparation the topics they are going to talk about. So conscious living and conscious leadership was present already inside the emails, in the questions, in the preparation. I'm really looking forward to really experience the presence of the topic. So I'm also inviting you to really open the minds and open the hearts and really let's just dive into the topic, experience the topic. So the structure of today's session is going to be like divided in 3 parts. The first part is going to be a flowy conversation with Nilima and Vijay, and me and Ina will ask some questions. Then the second part will go into the interactive work. We'll do this by breakout rooms, and Vijay has also prepared some very powerful questions for you to explore and to reflect upon. And we'll conclude also with the conversation with both of our speakers, and we'll open the discussion for the whole group. So, are you ready to dive into consciousness itself? Yes. All right. All right. Okay. So, as we were planning this session, we wanted to start very honestly, authentically, and with a basic question. So in the question is, since we have this duality present on many levels today, we have 2 speakers, we have man and a woman, a masculine and feminine aspect present, not just in your presence, but also in your topics. So how do we start a conversation on polarity? How do we explore polarity and how to start bringing them closer together? In short, so how do we start a conversation on polarity? Please.
I'm going to request Nilima to take that question because polarity is a very central part of her book and the Shakti leadership concept. So maybe she can start and then I can add a few things.
Well, all I will say is, it comes from ancient wisdom, the Tao, the Shiva Shakti, Jung, this whole thing that everything that's true, its opposite is equally true, and thus the universe seeks equilibrium, right? So I don't know if that was Freud or who, but if life is inhale and exhale, every single thing contains 2 things in it for it to exist. So whether we like it or not, duality or polarity is all the time. And it feels as if all our problems happen when we don't know how to balance them, when we don't know how to co-hold them. Our problems happen when we split into one or the other. And all the wisdom tradition tells us that our path back to wholeness is to heal the split between the 2 and put them back together. So good news is there is lots of wisdom and practice from around the world, ancient and modern, that shows us how, and that's what our life's work is about. So in the course of this conversation, we shall help you perhaps unpack where you may be stuck and how you can break through.
Vijay, do you feel anything to add?
Yeah, what I'd like to add is to say that when we are looking at polarity, it's important not to lose sight of the idea of wholeness, because polarity represents a split, and the split is only true in the context of what was whole to begin with. And so as we are discussing polarity and as we are discussing 2 different things, let's not lose sight of the whole from which the 2 emerge.
And it's within this, duality. However, I think we all got in touch with it. It's feminine and masculine, it's yin and yang, it's, through whatever exploration that we had, we know that there's a whole to be aspired to. Right now, we're living in very highly transformational times, very intense times. And, we called it the Brave New World when we titled the seminar. What's the biggest challenge for us to reach this wholeness that you see now?
Vijay, you want to take that?
Sure. Since we are going to talk a little bit about sense of humor later on in the conversation, right now, we are not sure about whether it's a grave new world with a G or a brave new world with a B. Unfortunately, if you look around you, you might only see the grave new world and maybe not the brave new world. And so I think for me, that is the challenge, to be able to lift our gaze from the immediate reality, the pain, the suffering, the disruption, the what shall I say, the paralysis of the entire system. But is it possible for us at this moment to raise our sights or to raise our gaze and look upon the brave new world, which none of us really know that much about? And so I think for me, what corona or what cancer or what any significant adversity teaches us is to not lose sight of what is happening right now, which is the grave new world, but to be able to lift our gaze and look ahead to what I call the brave new world that nobody knows exactly how things are going to shape up. And we will still do that with a sense of hope and optimism, because that is how mankind has overcome all our civilizational crises up to now. That's what I would like to say. Nilima, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I think our biggest challenge to step into the brave new world, I think the word brave means it takes courage. And it requires the heart of a hero. And the truth is, most of us are too full of fear and too comfortable with our old normal and comfort zones, because we fear the new, we fear change, we fear shifting the the stability, however unstable it was. So it's going to take the heart of a hero in each of us. And very often, as we know in Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, that when the call to adventure comes, which is what the COVID crisis is, it's humanity's call to adventure. Most people actually, they hesitate and they refuse the call to adventure because they'd rather die than change. So I'm afraid I'm going very deep very quickly, but I see this as the biggest challenge, that our fears and our lack of courage to make the changes that are required of us to sustain the planet and sustain ourselves.
There is no too quick, too deep with us. So feel free to go as deep as you want and you feel. It's perfectly fine. Okay. I really like how you are exploring, conscious living on your own field. So you have your own adventures. So Nilima, you are exploring Shakti leadership, the divine leadership, and Vijay, you're exploring the conscious living also through well-being. And I really like your journey from my cancer to me. My cancer is me is also the title of your book. The journey from illness to wholeness. And Nilima, you said that we have so much fear now and we are lacking courage. And I would like to go deeper on this. What do you think are also some other main challenges or diseases or cracks or traps for our consciousness today in this world, like during the Corona, 21st century? So what is stopping us to be more courageous, to step firmly and go to the hero's journey?
Oh gosh, I'll have to go one level deeper yet again. And this is a rather cliched term now that, is attributed to Einstein and so on, that the problem cannot be solved at the level it was created. So the crisis of our planet right now is a crisis of consciousness. We're basically at a split level of consciousness where we have separated our sense of I, the ego self, sees itself as separate from them and they and the other. And this is the cause of the separation, our sense of separation and our loss of the knowing of our interbeing and interconnectedness as a species is the cause of our problems. And until we heal that split and we know that we are interconnected, that none of us are going to be okay until all of us are okay, right? So we need to shift to the next level of consciousness. So it's a crisis of consciousness that requires us to wake up, grow up, show up. There's a lot of cleaning up to do. So there's so many obstacles on the path to really making the shift that's needed. It's also a crisis of leadership. We simply do not, all change is effected by someone who steps up into leadership, who claims their innate agency and power to fight the old system and to lead the way into the new. So if you look at the creation of the past, someone led it to this place. So our leaders have failed us. Our leadership has failed us without pointing fingers at anyone, right? So it's a crisis of leadership and a crisis of consciousness. So, I mean, that in its widest sense is the crux of the problem.
Thank you. Okay.
Would you like to add something?
I mean, Nilima has talked about, as she said, the deepest and the biggest and the broadest view of it. I guess if I were to individualize it and bring it to a very personal and a practical level, I guess for me, the way I see it is that each of us is being challenged to find resources that we didn't know we had. Because the truth is that the resources are not really going to come from outside. They are going to come from within us. And if we are at this particular situation in this crisis, and right now none of us really has the answer, I think we have to remember that the answer is going to come from within us and not from outside of us. So even for the leaders that Nilima is talking about, yes, the leaders have to step up and lead, but the answers for those leaders are going to come from their shifting of their own consciousness inside of them. In other words, a Davos or a United Nations is not going to come up with the answer. And unfortunately, our tendency so far has been to say, let's get a group of great minds together and let's hope that they will come up with an answer. I suspect that when it is something as fundamental as this, we are going to have to find the answers within us and then take them out and then mobilize people rather than to expect that the answer will come from outside of us. So that's the only dimension I would like to add to what Nilima has said.
And it's, yeah, Matej, go.
It resonates with me deeply. And I can reflect from my point of view, when we talk about the separation and how we are not separated, in so many cases, I feel it's coming from our mental level, and we talk about, but we don't feel it. Well, in person, I can sometimes, feel, let's say, the emotion of competition, and I don't feel connected. And I really feel that, like, it's so true, emotion in my emotional body, but I can also feel like the connection with people. And I'm just wondering, how to tap into the conscious feeling of togetherness, connectedness. So how can we tap into that? Because I guess we need that experience that comes from within us so that we can really change the external behaviors as well.
So I can take that. As you were speaking, I realized going deeper and wider into difficult places. Just as COVID was finishing, what has blown upon us, what has unexpectedly been, what earthquake event has revealed these wounds underneath the whole racial crisis, right? So what COVID has done is remind us that humanity urgently needs to shift to a new level of consciousness, but it cannot go there without healing its past, without grieving the past, and without healing the collective trauma that sits inside our personal and collective psyche. So there is so much trauma that needs to be healed and grieved and integrated, and for justice to be made, for atonement, for forgiveness. So much has to happen in order to be able to move into a new level of consciousness. So this field is already there. Consciousness is there. Unity is there. Ananda, bliss, joy is there. It is our wounding and our trauma that keeps us away from feeling it. So until we do the hard work of paying attention to and addressing these unhealed wounds. Now, to give you the example of an India or a US, right? So India has to heal its wounds of partition and having been split after, being released from its colony status, right? We have to heal our divides around casteism and religion. Similarly, the US hasn't healed its wounds around the Native American Holocaust and the appropriation of land from the indigenous people, hasn't healed from the slavery and the inequities caused by that and continue to, hasn't healed from the witch burnings of women considered witches. So all of us are ready and need to move to the next level of consciousness as a society, as a race, as a community, as a nation. But we can't do that until we revisit these unhealed wounds. We can't carry the baggage of the past into the new world.
Strong message.
So again, what I'd like to add to that is to respond specifically to your question, Matej, when you said that my sense of identity is very mental. It comes from how I see myself, and what is a way by which I can drop to a level where I can feel that emotional connection with everything else. And I know that many of you in this group are experienced meditators, and you have a lot of personal, maybe spiritual practice and so on. And if you see the meditative or contemplative or spiritual practices of all traditions, in a way, they all take us in the same direction, which is to say, can I learn to let go of my superficial individual identity and drop to the level of psychology where there is a collective element, and drop to the level of energy where there is a collective field, and drop to the level of collective consciousness. And so essentially the way I think is really for each one of us to find that practice that works for us, which allows us to drop from the superficial to the deeper, to the essential, to the universal, and then to the eternal. And if we don't have such a practice, then we can say whatever we want, we can write whatever we want, we can discuss whatever we want, but that shift will not take place internally. And so I think, just to support what Nilima said, that yes, it's important for us to raise our consciousness, it's important for us to heal the trauma, but for that we have to exercise the muscle of getting in touch with the deepest levels of ourself where that trauma is held. Otherwise, we are not really going to be able to deal with it at its root cause, at its root level.
Also, forgive me because I don't know a full history of what happened in your part of the world. But if there is the trauma of genocide and ethnic cleansing that sits in your country and around your region, then that too is something to be taken into account as you seek to become more conscious as a people and nation, and in a world post-COVID.
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling this very important message in terms of trauma and healing the trauma collectively. So it is individual practice indeed to dive in and to search and to recognize, but then there's this collective healing that needs to take place. And there's so much, it was said now, it's hard to even kind of go from, but there's one thing that is very much dependent within this, is power. Is how we understand power today. Where do we seek for it? How are we conscious of our own power? That I feel is deeply connected also to trauma. Just because we opened up this conversation, and I'm very curious also around how would you invite more collective healing of the trauma, and also how to rethink, reinvent, or see our own power differently.
You opened the dialogue on power, right? So there are so many, beautiful wisdom traditions around the world to look and understand what is this core currency that keeps life going and that is exchanged, which is power. And in the Indian yogic tradition, it's called Shakti. And what's interesting and sad, which is why I had to write the book and call it Shakti Leadership, is that all leadership and all the game out there today is win, lose, and power over. So, everyone needs power to survive. It's like the breath of life. You need to have agency to be effective and get things done. And, it's like a car without fuel doesn't run. A person without power cannot function, right? So everyone's out to grab power because they do not have connection to innate source. They do not have connection to their innate Shakti. That is what Shakti is, the power that runs you from within, that moves the cosmos and everything, that we are innately powerful. But because we are separated from our source, from our presence where the power is, we operate from our separated consciousness, which is ego. And then we get into these, I need to win and therefore you need to lose. And we do these power over games, or we give our power away in order to be taken care of by someone else. So the whole system of power has been built on power over and power under. And everyone has lost touch with the remembrance that there's enough power for all. There's enough power to go around. You don't need to be fighting each other, right? That there can be a way to do power with, because that comes from the realization that the only win is a win-win-win. Because if someone loses, because we're all part of the same system, one person's loss eventually will impact the whole, because the whole is the one, right? There is no other. So until we move to understanding the power game as, the only win is a win-win, and we have to do power with. And we have to do power with in a way that isn't just a wishy-washy way, but I call it becoming the wise fool of tough love. These are the 4 power bases. Have access to your parent self, that wisdom energy. Have access to your foolish child self, the fool energy. Have access to your masculine, your healthy, tough, boundary calling energy, not accepting the unacceptable. And then having access to your compassion and your feminine energy, your love. So these are 4 power bases that we need to be fully integrated with and have access to be doing power with. It's not masculine power, it's not only feminine power, it's having both, right? And essentially that is the power game that is going to create a world that works for all. Whereas we have understood power wrongly, that there isn't enough to go around, that more is better, and that's just the way it is. That's how you play the game. This is what Lynn Twist describes as our relationship with money, or our beliefs about money. But money is proxy for power. And so essentially these are beliefs about power, that there isn't enough to go around and more is better. And all that has, because we have innately been unplugged from our unlimited source, we are busy fighting each other for small batteries. and keeping everyone powerless. So yeah, becoming whole also puts us back in touch with the full flow of our power. When we split, we are disconnected from our power. So that's again the connection between wholeness and empowerment. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It opens it further, that's for sure. Because for me, you know, there's this notion I've started to discover around powerlessness being a very humble approach to knowing, to being aware of the whole and yourself and the interdependency of it. So not powerlessness as in I give up and I cannot, but powerlessness in you don't own it, you share it all the time with everyone. So I kind of feel it's an important distinction, or let's say understanding within it. Yeah.
I have a question. So when we do reconnect with our inner power, our authentic power, so how do we then use this power consciously? Like in our region, people are afraid of using power. They're afraid to misuse power, so they're really not taking the power. Or some people or some organizations are taking power, but they are, let's say, not going for the win-win. They're going for the win-lose. So my question is how to use power consciously when leading and also when living. So I'm broadening the topic a little bit.
So I'll quickly answer that on the leading and then let Vijay expand on it in the living. But for me, in the conscious leading with power is the idea of presence-based flexibility. So first you have to step into your presence, which is a place beyond your ego, where you have nothing to defend and nothing to promote and nothing to fear. From that place of equanimity, you will know what that leadership moment requires. What kind of power? Does it need wise? Does it need fool? Does it need tough? Does it need love? Right? And then you will play the right power self towards that situation. You'll show up in the right way in that leadership moment. It's very situational. All moments require, you can't have the same self responding to every moment. So do you have access to your fourfold self? And do you have presence, sufficient cultivation of presence to know how to flex to every leadership moment and challenge? That would be a way to exercise power consciously.
What I'd like to add to Neelima's comment is that because of the way power has evolved, and she explained it very well, that it's become a win-lose. If I have, it's a zero-sum game, that for me to feel powerful, somebody else has to feel helpless, etc. Somehow our society has taken power and turned it into a privilege, or turned it into a perquisite, or turned it into an entitlement even. I think we have lost sight of the fact that with great power comes great responsibility. And that when we take power, even our own power, along with it is an element of responsibility. And so exercising power means being aware of and operating from that place of responsibility. Now, what does that actually mean? So if I were to give you my personal example, that I feel as if I have a responsibility to share my knowledge and experience and insight as generously as possible so that the widest number of people can benefit. Now, if that element of service, selfless service, is always there as part of my experience of power, then the likelihood is that I will exercise that power responsibly. That means I will not allow my exercise of power to overtake my sense of responsibility. And this is a challenge. And, we were talking about universal power and so on. if you think about, the famous film Star Wars and Luke Skywalker and, use the Force. Well, the entire thing about being a Jedi is that you are very aware of your power, you're very humble with regard to your power, and you discharge it with responsibility. And that's the difference between the power on the side of the Force and the power on the dark side. So to me, how to exercise our power consciously comes down to really saying, what am I responsible for? Who am I responsible for? And how am I discharging my responsibility? If I have that, then I can bring my true and authentic power into the world. So again, with the use of power, there is a little bit of polarity and balancing that has to be done.
Which I think kind of connects to something that was mentioned before in terms of crisis of leadership. So much that, it's a privilege to be a leader that was so hard for me to ever understand, because we are all leaders of our own lives, and we are leading our lives, and there's people that are dependent on them. Therefore, it is not a single person or a single organization or a single country that will figure out this brave new world also, or lead us into it. It can only happen collectively. But on that note, I just want us to have enough time to dive into some exploration within the group. It feels good. There was so much said already, but there's so much more to continue with. Vijay and Nilima prepared 2 questions, and we will divide you in groups. Some of you will be having one question, some other. Matej, do we have it on a screen, or should I read it out loud? Just checking with you.
We don't have it on screen.
Okay. But they will be in the rooms, the questions then.
Yes.
Okay,
and I would just ask Vijay and Nilima, do we need to set a certain context, for the exercises? So what do we need to say up front before we go to the breakout rooms, and what should we do? Guide us.
Yeah, actually, I think I spoke enough in terms of setting context for my breakout questions. But Vijay, you may want to talk about some that the breakout question refers to.
Yeah, the question for the breakouts has been framed in the context of the subject of stress, which we did not really cover in the interview so far. So I would really leave it to Ina and Matej to decide, since it's in any case a pretty small group, whether you would like me to talk for a few minutes about stress and the framework around stress, because only with that context will the breakout question be relevant. That's one option. The other option is that since it's a relatively small group and we've talked about power, then it's perfectly fine for the breakout groups to only work with Nilima's question on power, because sufficient context has been set. So I guess you guys as hosts need to decide how you want to use the time available, and whether you would really like to go down the track of stress, in which case then I would need probably 5 or 7 minutes to talk about it. So.
Well, from my side, I can vote yes to talk on stress, because stress has become such a normal word to say, oh, you're under stress, it's bad, oh, it's stressful. And, there's so much of the pace of the world as we still know it's conditioned with stress. So I definitely would love to hear, and then we can go into the questions.
Okay, all right, great. So, when we were talking and preparing for this, you guys used a phrase which was saying stress is the old normal. And I found that phrase to be very interesting, because the way I see it, stress is going to be part of the new normal as well. Yes, it was part of the old normal, but I think that stress is going to be very much part of the new normal as well. And the reason is that when we are under stress, like right now when we are in a crisis and the stress on all of us is high, it amplifies our differences. It amplifies the sharp edges of our personality. And so again, coming back to the point that Nilima made, that, why is it that the racial crisis has suddenly come upon us just as COVID was beginning to come under some kind of control? My answer to that is that the stress has created a crack. And from that crack, something has erupted or something has come up that we don't really know how to handle. So my sense is that as we navigate this COVID crisis, the stress is going to increase and not decrease, which makes it even more important for us to know how do we understand stress and how do we actually process it and how do we deal with it. So first of all, I want to say that nature has given us the ability to experience stress as a gift, not as a punishment. And that is because nature has given us the neurology and the biology to be able to really give ourselves that boost with stress hormones when we need it. And that was very relevant for us when we were using it for survival. So look at how the circle has come full circle now. That in our tribal days, we used to look at, survival, then survival became taken for granted. Then we started using our stress hormones for success. And now suddenly humanity is threatened with survival all over again. We are confronting our own mortality. And now we are going to use the same stress hormones for survival again, right? So for me, therefore, if you see stress as overall a good thing, but somehow it has spun out of control, then the question becomes, how do we come to grips with it? And what is a framework that we can use? So the framework that we use in our book on cancer, and by the way, that is a book that Nilima and I co-authored rather than just being my book. In that we talk about stress being addressed or understood at 5 different levels. We talk about it at the physical level. So physical level has to do with all the stuff that we're familiar with. Diet and nutrition and rest and relaxation and laughter and environment and all of that. And that is the kind of stress that we are all intimately familiar with. We read about it. There are lots of TV programs about it and so on. But there is also a deeper part of us, which we discussed earlier, which is the emotional part of us, which is the feeling level. And therefore, stress can come from that part of us and affect us at that part. So that is emotional stress. And while everyone experiences emotional stress, it's not a concept that is as familiar as, say, physical stresses. So that's the second level of stress. And that happens at the level of our feelings, how we express our feelings, how we react to stimulus through the expression of certain feelings, etc. So that's the second level. The third level of stress is what we call mental stress, which is really about our mind and the tricks that our mind plays in terms of our beliefs, our assumptions, our judgments, the fact that many of us are our worst inner critic. So at the level of the mind, there is a lot of stuff which is stressful, and which is why practices like mindfulness or practices like meditation or practices which help you to calm and to center and to take charge of your mind are so popular these days, because we're dealing with stress at a different level, which is the mental level. The fourth level is what we call relational stress, which is the inherent stress that we started this conversation with, to say that when you're in relationship, the fact that they are two separate individuals, or if you're in relationship in the workplace with a peer or with a colleague, the fact that you're two different individuals means that there is going to be some amount of differences and some amount of friction. And often that can turn into a lot of stress, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's in our social life, whether it's in our cultural life, in our political life, etc. So in other words, how can you deal with the stress that is in your life looked at through the lens of your relationships? That's the fourth level of stress. And the fifth and final level of stress, and this comes as a surprise to many people, is we talk about spiritual stress. Now, when we talk about spiritual stress, we are not talking about the religion or the faith or the denomination that you come from. We are actually talking about whether or not you are connected to a higher purpose, and whether your life is aligned to something that you feel is truly worthy and bigger than yourself. That's part one. Part two is we ask whether you are living an authentic life, or whether you are masking a lot, whether you are pretending a lot, whether you are faking it a lot. Because when you do, that creates a huge amount of stress for us. And the dance between authenticity and conforming is something that many of us struggle with. And we think that this is a part of our spiritual stress. The third part, which Nilima has talked about earlier, is the separation from our source, which is that whatever name we give it, our connection or our disconnection from our source is a major cause of asking the big questions in life, which we don't have answers to. Who am I? Where am I going? Where have I come from? What matters? Right? All of these questions essentially come because we have, in a way, lost connection with our highest source. And so when you look at stress and when you are able to break it down into these components, now these are not exclusive components, they're obviously all related because it's the same person. And yet it gives us a way to deal with stress, it gives us a way to manage stress. And so what we have done in our work is to actually create an online instrument where you can diagnose your own stress at each one of these 5 levels. Because the simple view is that if you can't diagnose something properly, how will you address it? How will you take the right actions? Right? So I wanted to give this overview because otherwise stress is one of those words which is a commonly used word, but nobody has a shared definition of it. If you ask the 18 people in this group, each one will have their own definition. Each one will have their own coping strategy. And each one will be telling the other that you should follow my coping strategy because it works for me. And the answer is that we are all individuals. Each of these 5 levels are different for us, and we need to find our own answers to it. So just to summarize, we look at stress at 5 levels: physical, lifestyle oriented, emotional, feelings oriented, mental, thoughts oriented, beliefs oriented, assumptions oriented, relational, which is stress coming from our relationships around us, and spiritual, which has to do with answering those fundamental questions that remain unanswered for many of us, either because we haven't found our purpose, or because we are not leading an authentic life, or because we have lost connection with our source. So that, in a nutshell, is the approach to stress. And hopefully with that context, Ina and Matej, now the breakout question will make a little more sense.
Thank you so much. In the meantime, I also prepared questions so that we can review them together. So these are the 2 questions for the breakout rooms. You can see them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as we are 18, we'll break mostly in groups of 3.
Yes, and I would
That
like
would
to ask
be
Vijay and Nilima, would you like to go into the rooms as well?
Yeah.
Sure, happy to.
Okay.
So the idea is to divide, and the question will also be with you in the breakout room and at the top of the cursor. We're going to have 15 minutes. So each person gets around 5 minutes to speak, share his or her thoughts, and then we're going to come back together to learn together what came out from the conversations. Okay?
Yes.
You're going to get us out.
by 4. Some of you will be moved in a minute, okay? But you can start the conversation. Enjoy. Welcome back, dear people.
Welcome back.
I hope you enjoyed your sharings and that they were conscious. And
was it only 15 minutes? I thought it was like an hour. We talked so much.
Well, congratulations that you have done so much in 15 minutes. It says something about you and your communication. So let us harvest a little bit. So what is present with you on the topics, on the questions? So we had 2 questions, and we would like to explore both briefly. The power question and the stress question. So
whoever feels like sharing. So there's no.
Sonia?
I can start. We, with Susanna, we had the privilege. We were alone in our connection room. So we really shared a lot. And we saw that there was a lot of power play still in our companies. And it depends how you respond to this power game, power over game. Because both Susanna and me are inclined to power with, but challenged very often with power plays and such provocations. So we have different styles of coping with that. And we would like to hear also some other style. For example, Susanna doesn't want to go into this competition of the power, while I very often really go into this power play because I want to person who is exercising power over to bring down to my level. And this is very exhausting for me, usually. That's why I would like to have some hints how to really invite person to play partnership, to play power with. So this was the first part of our discussion. And another one was how to balance masculine and feminine. And in our language, we don't have a special word for masculine and feminine. And when we explain, sometimes we are, we sound very strange. That's why I came out with a new words for this. I use a combination of action as a male energy and concentration as a vessel, as something that is preparing for the action. And with this new narrative, it is easier to explain why we need both, why we need intention, very deep reflection, intuition, everything to prepare what I think it is quality of the feminine energy, so that the action, the quality of masculine energy can really take off. So this was for our part. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Anybody else feels to share the insights of the group?
Can I?
Sure, Lydia, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Maya, Claudia, and me, we're discussing the stress after the COVID crisis in our country. And we all agreed that these 5 elements of you being a stress, we never do that in a wholeness. usually we look at it partially, so the level of physicality, and then level of emotions, and level of mental and relations, and the spiritual part. So now we've looked at the whole 5 areas in this crisis, and we saw that the feeling part is quite low in the society. So the feeling part is that it is the most concealed in the society. But on the other hand, the stress was really felt in the society in few different ways. Like some people were panicking, some people were feeling opportunity for a growth or be creative, and it was the call for the change. And then we saw that we have to take care of mental part of us as a humanity in the same view as growth for the growth. Then in the relational view of this stress, it came out that we took very good care of the elders and for the children. For the schooling, we had the opportunity to really know each other, even inside our families, and that everything was really a good opportunity for spiritual growth. Then the next issue that came up was the forbidden or how to say it? Sorry?
You mean
to go
so
out.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to go out. So this was really painful for some people. And then something came out after the crisis. The people who are already in the crisis in spite of COVID-19. So we were feeling the crisis only now, but there are people who feels this that kind of crisis all the time. So that was something that came up, and on the end we can say that Corona came in the right timing for some, or maybe for most, to take off, to be with each other, but it also shown the big gap between the knowledge that we have and the practice that we do every day, and that is opportunity for the authenticity, because the real values came through and shown them to us or for us. That was in our group. We didn't discuss anything about the power. We didn't have time.
Thank you, Lydia.
Yeah, welcome.
When we go deep, I guess we lose the sense of time, and we also would like to have more time to go deeper. So it's a common feeling. Okay, let us try to harvest some additional questions from your sharings for Vijay and Nilima. And I will just connect to what Lydia and your group were saying, that how we feel stress on multiple levels, and every level is connected and it affects each other. But you were mentioning relationships. So how there we feel, maybe especially in Slovenia, so much stress and so much emotional violence towards ourselves, but also towards our partners and our families. And since we have a couple here, Vijay and Nilima, and you share that you've been through, let's say, quite a lot as individuals, also as a couple. So can I invite you like to share which realizations which conscious realization did help you to balance each other better, to to cooperate better as a couple, as a masculine and feminine divine energy. So what did help you? Any hints and tips for the Western minds?
Vijay, you want to go first? I'll go first. What do you prefer? Vijay?
It's better you go first.
Okay. So we are married 32 years this month, on the 24th of June. I was 21 and he was 26 when we got married. So we kind of grew up together, and we didn't really know how to do relationship in any formal way. We learned as we went along. And I joke that I'm in my third marriage with the same man. So it's been about 10 years of 3 different relationships. And maybe in the West, you would have had 3 marriages by now, but it's the same couple here. So I think the first 10 years was when we were 2 happy codependents. As Jerry Maguire says, you complete me. So we were like very happy to be 2 halves who completed each other. And then as we learn in relationships that this is called a positive bonding pattern, and night follows day, you're kind of doomed to then experience the negative bonding pattern. So I think the next 10 years, which also coincided more or less with Vijay getting cancer, the power equation between us and everything shifted. It was a very traumatic, dark time. As he and I and the family, everything had to just go through a lot. It was a death of a kind in many, many ways. And so it was a very difficult time in the relationship as we struggled to find our own center and still keep the marriage going. It was hard. Maybe Vijay can talk about his journey at that time and what that did to the relationship. But then the last 10 years after that is when I think the only thing that kept us going is a deep, deep love and commitment for each other. I think only that level of depth, that depth of love for each other could have survived the profound trauma and crisis that I think the cancer brought on in our lives. And yet here we are, we survived, we came through. And then because our work is about personal growth and self-mastery, we can't be authentic and teach other people what we are not learning and practicing ourselves. So, for me, to Vijay's great credit, he has deep emotional honesty. And, we were both willing and able to do the hard work on ourselves and hang in there, no matter how difficult the conversations happened between both of us. We were able to hang in there and not break down. And we then broke through, and it took a long time. I think after so many years, finally I can say we're in a place where it truly feels different. It truly feels harmonious all the way through. It is a win-win relationship, which it wasn't earlier. And only because I was 5 years younger, I'm a woman, I'm an Indian woman, I very happily played into the patriarchal model of being the man in a position of power. So I had to learn a lot and renegotiate the unwritten contract. And to his great credit, he hung in there and he danced with me to this place where we are now. So I don't know if you got any answers on what makes it tick. How do you survive 32 years and come out stronger and better and as much in love and more committed to each other? But I think that's where we are today.
Thank you, Nilima. I think we got it. We felt it. Vijay, how about your part? You have to unmute yourself.
Nilima has covered most of it, but what I'd like to add is that, and I'm just broadening it out a little bit so that I'm not just covering our relationships, but relationships in general. whether they are between business partners or whether they are between colleagues, as well as whether they are between husband and wife. So my belief has always been that in every relationship, there are some things that unify or attract, and there are some things that push away or separate or divide. And my feeling really is that if we are clear about what are those things that unite, and that forms the bedrock of the relationship, then that gives the relationship a certain strength and resilience to be able to withstand the pressures that are inevitable in every relationship. Now, if I look at Nilima and myself, and through our various conversations, we have together concluded that probably we have some significant differences in so many different things. But together, those differences may probably constitute somewhere between 5 and 10% of our overall relationship. So the net, if you take minus the differences from the unifiers, is still way in the positive area. And in a way, that has been our touchstone to say, hey, whenever we have a conflict, whenever we have a difference of opinion on something small or something very big, then we always have to go back to the keystone or to the bedrock and say, hey, let's not forget that this is what we have in common, this is what we care about, this is what we are committed to. And now in the context, how can we deal with the 5% or the 10% or the 15%? I know that not all couples have that kind of an equation. I know that. I know that not all partners in business have that kind of equation. But I think the principle is that just like when you have a conflict on anything else, you look for common ground and then you work up from the common ground. I think the same is true for us in our relationship. So that's the only part that I think I would like to add to what Nilima has said.
Thank you, both. Okay.
I'm kind of pausing because there's, this relationship conversation and learning about life and understanding life with your partner, whoever that is rich and hard and beautiful. And so important to practice, Vijay, like you said before, and mentioned practice a lot of times, turning away from that core relationship, whatever that is, and not practicing the living or the leadership you want to see outside. It's very hard to portray or to talk about it then to others within organizations, within any kind of system. And I'm going to connect my question a little bit to power, just because that was also one part of the question. And Sonia, you were speaking about your conversations that I think got answered quite well already within this. But there's something within the power and the privilege of power that we managed to develop that we also mentioned before, that connects to the thought or the thinking we have. We can control things, we have the power to control life. We have the power to control the strategy that needs to work next year without whatever pandemic happening. We have the power to fix things. This is very present in how we are, how we think, how we do. And it's very hard to let go of that. I think that's a big learning from this pandemic and other crises to come. But I wonder, within the living and the leadership, what are your views and how would you invite more of that letting go of that control and thinking of power?
Vijay?
Let me speak from the lens of health and life and death, rather than just from the sense of power. traditional societies have generally been very comfortable with the idea that life and nature is a cycle, and that what goes up must come down, what grows must decay and die. There is a sense of rhythm, and there's a sense of a cyclical nature in everything. This is how traditional societies have basically lived for millennia. Modern societies somehow, I don't know why, have taken a more linear kind of an attitude to say things have to get better, we have to get richer, things have to get more prosperous, our civilization has to grow and develop. And it almost feels as if we have lost touch with that whole cyclical nature. Now, why am I saying this? Because once you get attached to a linear trajectory and to a linear objective, then you're deeply invested in keeping it that way. And we therefore then exercise a lot of our strength and our willpower and our courage and our determination to keep things in a certain way on a certain track. But we all know, and I know from my personal experience, that life is, just as much as life is abundant, life is also brutal. Just as much as life is delicious, life also is very fragile. And so I feel that it's not about having control or letting go control. I think it's, in many ways, I feel as if many people actually feel that they have less control than they actually do. In fact, I encourage a lot of people to take back more control, because they do have more control over themselves and more influence over their immediate surroundings than people think they have. Whereas there are also people who think they have more control than they actually do. And the minute you do that, life will come and give you a knock, a whack on the side of the head and remind you that, hey, you don't have actually that much control. So, please be humble. So I feel as if, just to summarize my thought, that we generally go through this, like Nilima said earlier, inhale and exhale, inhale and exhale. We are constantly going through a small death and a little rebirth, and a small death and a little rebirth, and a small death and a little rebirth. And if one can allow ourselves to flow with that rhythm, then I think the issue of control actually becomes secondary. Then you're just enjoying the flow. And that's how I look at it. So I'll hand over to Nilima to say whatever she wants to say.
So I'll build on what Vijay said in a more somatic and yogic way, because I'm a yoga teacher and a dancer and so on, that I have learned to listen to my body, and it tells me when is the time to actually control and when is the time to let go. And, most times we are in step with things and we are leading from the front, but we all have experiences where life takes over and you just know that your car is going into a spin, for example. And that's when, this is a little trick we have in our Shakti work, we put your hands up metaphorically and you literally say to yourself, letting go the hold of me and slipping into the flow of Shri, Shri being Shakti, or the greater force of life that is more intelligent and knows where it's going, and that you have to now submit to that greater intelligence and flow, however crazy it may feel. So that requires a tremendous amount of faith. And that faith comes when in the past you have done it and you have realized the outcome is far better than anything your mini self could have controlled. So with more faith comes more faith. That there are times where you have to really lift your arms up and say, letting go the hold of me and slipping into the flow of Shri. So the COVID lockdown was a time like that, where really we had no control, right? So what do? And instead of feeling helpless, to kind of let your body ease into the current of life as it's flowing is a different kind of mastery. So you're saying, how we talk about surrender, but even surrender is something you have to master. Comes with practice.
So great. So great. I just sense a question which wasn't addressed at all. It's connected to that, to control, to the flow of life. And Vijay, I feel it's more lean towards you. You know, your journey with the cancer. So there, I assume, was a huge and powerful journey of your health, your consciousness. Can you like briefly guide us through your journey? What happened, what you realized, what needed to transform, and how it transformed your point of view about life and death, and yeah, life itself.
It's a 19-year journey, so I'm going to try and condense it down as much as possible. So I was diagnosed with colon cancer soon after I turned 40, which was now 19 years ago. So there I've revealed my age to you. It obviously came as a shock, and I felt at that time, I felt like I was violated and betrayed and ambushed, and why me, and what's going to happen to the family, and all those kinds of typical things that everyone goes through. But I was very lucky because my medical situation was quite positive, and because my medical situation was quite positive, in a way the doctors said, well, we've done what we've done. Now you go away and lead a healthy, normal life and hope and pray that this won't come back. So to which I said, look, I'm not a hope and pray kind of guy. So I'm going to see whatever else I can do to make sure that I can stay healthy. And I was very, very lucky because I got help from some amazing people in my very early days of cancer. Very, very good people. So one was a psychologist, one was a spiritual teacher, and one was a Chinese medicine practitioner. So through these people, both Nilima and I were really open to looking at every possibility. And then we started to see that actually being healthy, not just from cancer, but from any chronic illness, a lot is possible. And this comes back to the point that Ina made earlier, which is about control and influence. Actually, we have a great deal of control and influence about our health. And if we know what those modalities are, and if we know how to put them together, then actually we can do a lot for ourselves. So I would say that the first 2-3 years or 5 years was really trying to figure this out, and a sort of vague framework was developing in our minds. But probably the next 5 to 7 years, things crystallized, and in my own journey, I realized that I had a responsibility to use my journey for the benefit of others. So it was not enough for me to just say, okay, I'm a thriver. I like to call myself a thriver and not a survivor. But I want to make sure that a lot of other people in the world can also become thrivers. So one of the things that I say is that cancer or any adversity or any illness can actually be a springboard for your own growth and development. And so rather than to see it as an adversity to which you have to submit, or an adversity that you have to fight, if you submit, you're a victim. If you fight, you're a survivor. But can you actually grow from it, in which case you can become a thriver? So I was very lucky because this switch happened in me very early. And because I was in a physically good place, I could actually develop this along with Nilima and along with various other people, and turn it into my life's work and my life's purpose. So what was a tremendous adversity, a life-threatening thing, took me into a very dark place. And so it follows the hero's journey arc beautifully. You're shaken out of your normalcy, you go to an unfamiliar world, you have to confront your own shadow, you then learn a lot of new things and build up a lot of new capacities, and then you find the elixir and then you bring it to the world. So in a way, I would say that my journey parallels this hero's journey, and therefore it is a central part of what we teach, both in my work with cancer and Nilima's work with leadership. So I would say that in a nutshell, that would be my journey.
Thank you, Vijay.
We have so many questions also with Matej ready, but there's also like, we haven't heard you, and I see a lot of curious faces. So if there's a burning question within you that you would like to pose to Nilima or Vijay, or them both, I just want to kind of open a little bit, if there's any. Patrick, go.
Yes, I would still like to share from a moment ago, because first of all, I'm very grateful for all the beautiful faces I see in the room again. And since we're in Slovenia, the only country with love in its name, I can sense that that's the connecting line between all of us, is the love. And I wanted to say thank you to Nilima and Vijay. A while ago, you probably didn't notice, but you both had this very special smile at the same time together. You know, it was a moment of tenderness as you both went back into the recollections of the moments that changed the course of your lives. You both kind of lit up at the same time, which I just wanted to share that. That was very beautiful. And in our group, we had Milena and Vijay and myself. Milena, she shared with us the seeker, searching so hard for the answers and the path, and it resonated with both of us, Vijay and myself, because we are all searchers. We felt this connection in the searching, but also the frustration in the not finding, because we are, 1/1,000,000th of 1/1,000,000th of 1/1,000,000th of an inch on a 1,000,000-mile journey, and that connected everything. And as Vijay shared, this element of not paying attention to our bodies, it resonated with all of us because almost none of us do. And then when Vijay mentioned the immunity, which is the strength and the resilience to persevere against all things, I felt the strength of the connection with Nilima, that when we are connected, and this was also for Milena, we are stronger in all the things, be it the emotional, be it the mind, be it the body, be it the spirit. It seems that the connection to the wholeness is what brings us into that space of oneness, yeah, and strength, right? So in our group, I could sense these elements. And then as Ina was speaking of the relationships, I realized that we're trying so hard for one relationship to be really good. And then I remembered Nilima saying the endless power is, what if every relationship was that quality of relationship, which means we're equal, which means unconditional love. As we accept that each relationship we have can be the most beatific of relationships. And then we tap into the endless energy of the universe, because it's the entrance to the oneness of the wholeness is through love. So I wanted to share that. The group of three and this whole group kind of inspired that, and always through the smiles that you now have again. So the smiles are our wise spirit recognizing that we finally understand just one little tiny bit, and laughing at us like the Dalai Lama laughs all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for the smile which led to all of this. Okay, who else feels to share, to ask? You can also share what is present with you at the moment.
Because otherwise I have this moving, like my body started moving more as Patrick was speaking, and a smile came back to my face. It always does with him. And one of the things on my path was also meeting yoga and becoming a yoga teacher, and just exploring yogi philosophy a tiny little bit. I'm not even gonna say, but noticing our bodies. And as you said before, you said it so lightly, Nilima, I notice it in my body, and then I just know how to let go. It's really, we are so disconnected from our minds with our bodies. That's one huge lesson I got through my journey. And there's so much of yoga philosophy and practice I always try to bring into different leadership trainings. And I always see how, I'm amazed how disconnected we are. So I'm really curious to hear, your journey with yoga, and how you, of course, bring it through Shakti leadership and your ways of approaching, and what are you sensing with your work as you work with different people on leadership development?
So I've been a dancer all my life since the age of 6, and then after marriage, because we were moving around internationally, I didn't have time to continue my training. And then at the turn of the millennium, I felt I need to start some body work again. And I found Shivananda Yoga 15 minutes away from our home in Wimbledon in Putney. It was a love affair that has never ended. So as I gave myself to yoga as a replacement to dance in my life, the beautiful thing of, how many of you practice any kind of yoga? Just a few hands up. You do have an experience. Okay. So what's incredible is when you're on the mat and you put in those funny poses, you realize something starts shifting. And when you come out of it, you're blissed out. You're breathing better. You're in this wonderful, space of body, mind, and spirit. And so I realized this is not just a bunch of exercises. This is something way deeper. It's deceptively simple, but it's actually something very deep. So I took up a much deeper study of yoga and Vedanta, and it's all about being more conscious and using your body and your breath to become more connected with your whole self, etc. So when I started learning and teaching leadership, I realized everything that I was learning in yoga was so relevant to become a conscious leader, because the leader you are is the person you are. So if I had to give the book any other title, instead of calling it Shakti Leadership, I would have called it The Yoga of Leadership. It was a book called The Tao of Physics. So this would have been the yoga of leadership. So I had these two parallel lives. I had my yoga life, and then I had my corporate training, leadership work life. And then I realized, oh my God, they're two sides of the same coin, and I need to now put them together. And essentially, Shakti leadership is the model of how to be a yogi in leadership. Yogi or a yogini in leadership.
And again, the way, Nilima, you said it, yogi in leadership, it sounds kind of simple, and it's so not. It takes a lot of practice. But there's one more thing. I now remembered. Matej, maybe you take us to the laughter part.
Yes. So we wanted to conclude with the topic of humor and laughter and smile. So how can we bring more of this joy quality and humor as also like soul aspect to our lives? How to be lighter about our journey, and how to use it to really step lighter, and to make our steps easier. So any thoughts on this? How to bring such smiles as Vijay, now smiling in Nilima, more to our awareness from our lives, and that it will support us?
So let me start, and then Nilima, you can join in. One of my great heroes is Charlie Chaplin. I've always loved Charlie Chaplin. And one of the things that Charlie Chaplin said was that if you find life anything other than absurd or entertaining, you're in trouble. I'll repeat that. If you find life to be anything other than absurd and entertaining, you're in trouble. And that quote has always stuck with me. And I've always tried, therefore, to see some of the absurd and the crazy and the eccentric qualities of life, because they give me a different perspective on it. So I personally believe that not losing your sense of humor is a very important quality for leaders, particularly when things are tough and so on. The other quote that I remember is, it's been attributed to many people, so I don't know who said it first. They said, take your work seriously, but don't take yourself seriously. And again, that has struck me as being a very powerful insight, because much of the trouble that is there in the world is because we are taking ourselves seriously rather than we take ourselves more seriously than we take our work. And that makes us into, proud and arrogant and egoistic and self-righteous and pompous and all of that stuff. And this is where humor comes and punctures that. And everything collapses, and then we can all laugh like human beings. Right? But more seriously, why is humor important? And I worked in an advertising agency and for 25 years. And one of the things that was different about our agency, as we said, was that there was a lot of laughter in the hallways. People would be laughing aloud a lot. And I realized in my own journey that there is a lot of commonality between humor and creativity. And essentially, if you think about a joke, how does a joke work? A joke is when somebody tells you a story and then suddenly there is a snap. It's called a cognitive snap. And then there is a punchline and the penny drops and you laugh. Right? This is how humor works. This is exactly how the creative process works. That you work, you do research, you analyze, blah, 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 you do all that stuff, and suddenly there is a break, there's a cognitive snap, you have an inspiration or you have an idea. And then you laugh and you say, wow, this never existed before. So I find that in our world right now, we have become so serious about the problems we are trying to solve. We have become so self-righteous about the changes we want to make. And many of us are forgetting that actually there is a lot of absurd and eccentric and crazy stuff that is worth laughing about. So as far as I'm concerned, if we don't do this, then we are missing an amazing opportunity to enjoy ourselves and also to be creative. So that's what I would like to say, and I'd love for Nilima to add something.
I just think that men have an edge over women, when it comes to humor. It's such a beautiful, healthy, masculine skill. And this is why we lived in Britain, in England for 4 years. And I could see it in the newspapers every day, the whole laddish humor, to be a lad and be able to crack jokes. And so when I talk about the wise fool of tough love, I think it's the masculine in us that has this access to levity, as well as the fool, the child in us that knows humor and how to lighten up and not take themselves seriously. So the child self redeems me, because as an Enneagram type 1, I can be far too serious. But what redeems me is my Sufi practice. So somewhere, must be in a past life, I have been a Sufi. And this whole thing about masti, I don't know if you know the word masti. It means, what's the translation, Vijay?
Actually, masti means mischief.
Yeah.
Mischief.
Right? Mischief. And so all the Sufi practices are about making yourself as stupid and as foolish and as mischievous as you can be. And including talking in gibberish, which is one of their practices for spiritual enlightenment. To talk gibberish until you can't but, burst out laughing and kind of realize, how seriously you were taking something when actually nothing is really so full of meaning. Everything eventually becomes meaningless. So I think my Sufi practices in the ability to just dance and whirl and be childlike is where I go and rest and find my ability to laugh again. So that would be my way of finding humor.
I mean, isn't that a great energy to have a bow on this conversation of ours or this gathering of ours tonight? Just it feels we're so in trouble because we are taking things so way too seriously all the time. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but like really have those moments and practice them again, Vijay, like you said. So bearing that in mind, are we going to do our word cloud for like kind of a checkout of today, Matej?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
I thought Matej has it.
Yes, Matej is going to give the link, but I'll have to put up I'll have to share my screen and put up the sheet. So let me explain what we are going to do. Matej is going to, in the chat window, he's going to put a link. And what we want all of you to do is to copy and paste that link into your browser and open a new window. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen so you can see what everyone will see. So let me just check if all of you have been able to pick up the link, because I'm now going to activate this poll. You will see it come up on your screen. And what we would like each one of you, Matej, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see the screen. And if we refresh the browser, there is one word feedback.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yes. So what I want everyone to do is I would like you to take a few seconds to reflect on this session that we've had. We've been together now for 2 hours. And I would like each one of you to capture your feedback about this session in one word and enter that word in the window and hit submit. And you can do, each one of you can do that 3 times. And let us see what kind of picture emerges when each one of us does it 3 times. So one word feedback, and you have the chance to put in 3 different words. So let me make the screen full so you can also see what's happening on the screen. There you go. You can repeat words if you like. You can find words that others have used which are interesting and you can put them in. You can play with it. So as we said, enjoy and play. We had 18 people, so we need at least 54 words. Go for it. Okay, another 30 seconds before we close this activity. If you haven't put in your 3rd word, put it in. Okay, last 10 seconds. Okay, so let's see what's coming up. We have love, which is a big word. Then we have smile, we have wholeness, we have oneness, we have connection, we have consciousness, we have humor. These are the main feedback elements, so thank you for that. Around the edges, we have enlightening, gentle, peace in the heart, resilient, kind, relaxing relationships, joy, soft, ease, power with. So we are able to see as a group what are the connectors, as Patrick said. It looks like love, smile, wholeness, oneness, consciousness, power, connection seem to be the connectors or seem to be the key elements from today's session. So with that, from our side, I think we are done, and let me stop sharing my screen and hand you back over to Matej and Ina to close.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, we did. Thank you. I have just I feel the invitation that we should or we could end in a funny, humorous way. And what do you say that we all speak gibberish like for 15 seconds, then we just make a big smile, then we say goodbye. What do we say to that?
Sure.
So you just unmute and start talking gibberish for 15 seconds. Then when you will see the smiles coming out, just smile for 5 seconds, then we say goodbye and we go. Okay?
Okay.
Let's start.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Keep smiling.
Bye.
Love you all. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You wanna say goodbye? Yeah.
Bye-bye.